الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. The Prophet ﷺ was sitting with the companions one time, and he had his beloved grandkids with him, Hassan and Hussein radiallahu anhuma. And as little kids do when adults are talking, they wanted to participate in the conversation. And so Hussein radiallahu anhu, he gets up and he wants to speak, he wants to talk, he wants to participate. And so he gets up and he starts to talk in this gathering of adults. And as he's talking, he starts to stutter and fall over his words. And he has difficulty completing sentences. Because although his older brother Hassan was well spoken, Hussein had a stutter. He had that speech impediment. And so he starts to talk and he's saying what he wants to say. And the companions start to exchange glances. Not in a malicious way, but kind of poor kid, right? You feel bad for the child. And they look over to see what is the reaction of the Prophet ﷺ, and he's sitting there grinning ear to ear, listening to every word. Just smiling. Just listening, focused in. Not doing anything else, not saying anything else. And when he's done, and one thing that's important to note is imagine what we would do with our kids in that situation. First we would tell them, okay, we got the point, let's get back to talking. Go play, go do something else. We would try to finish their sentence for them. We would do any number of things to get them to stop talking so we could go back to whatever it is that we were doing before. But the Prophet ﷺ sat, he listened, he paid attention. And when Hussein was done, he looked at the companions and he said, don't feel bad for him. This is something that he inherited from his uncle Musa alayhi salam. And so in that moment, he knew that what that child needed was that positive reinforcement. Right? Not critical, not anything else, but in fact a source of pride. That you share something in common with a great prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in that moment, he demonstrated something to us, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When we hear the ayat, that he was not sent except as a mercy to mankind. When we hear the narrations that he was not sent except to perfect good conduct and character, we see what that means. That he operated from a place of empathy and compassion in all situations. See, when we hear that he was sent to perfect good conduct, good manners, good etiquette, all these things that get thrown at us that we hear a million times, we tend to boil it down to a few basic things. Be nice to your parents. When you go out to eat tonight, say please and thank you to the waiter. When you go to work and your employee screws up, don't yell at them. That's how we define good conduct. But the reality is that that's essentially just not being a jerk. That's not good conduct. That's not the pinnacle of good manners. What's the pinnacle of good conduct that the Prophet ﷺ was sent with? And that's what he showed us here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes him by saying, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. That this messenger has been sent to you, and grievous to him is what you suffer. He is concerned over you, and to the believers he is kind and merciful. The difficulty that you go through, the hardships that people face, sometimes he cared about them more than they cared about themselves. That was his character, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That whatever difficulty someone was going through, whatever hardship someone was going through, he felt that as well. And that enabled him, that allowed him to approach them from a perspective of compassion. We know the famous story of the Bedouin who came into the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, and he went and urinated in the corner. And the companions were rightfully upset that someone has walked in and they have desecrated this holy area. And when they looked at the Prophet ﷺ, he stood up and he said, no, let him finish what he's doing. And then when he is done, he went and spoke to him. And he explained to him that this is the house of Allah. This is where we make sajda. This is where we glorify Allah. This type of behavior is not appropriate. But the companions, they had stood up and they were ready to take him to task. But he understood, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that this is a man that came from the desert. He's not from this civilized society. He hasn't been exposed to much. He doesn't know what we're doing. He doesn't know any better. And so I need to sit and explain to him and speak to him at his level, in a way that will bring about the desired outcome. And so the Bedouin, he stood up and he said, may Allah forgive me and him, but not the other ones. And he told him, don't restrict what Allah has made fast. Don't try to restrict Allah's mercy. We know the famous story of the young man that walked into the masjid. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, give me permission to fornicate. Now imagine that someone walks in on Friday night while the tafsir class is going on, and they're not dressed like someone who's ready to go to the masjid, and they make this request perhaps not using the formal language. What would our reaction be? How upset would we be? How angry would we be? What would our gut reaction be? We would be upset. We would feel that this was disrespectful to the masjid. How much more disrespectful would it be if the Prophet ﷺ is sitting right there? And so the natural reaction, again, we see from the companions. And yet he told them, hold on, hold on. He took this young man aside and he spoke to him. He tried to understand what's going on with him, because no one walks in and just makes that request unless there's something happening. And so he sits with him. He talks to him. He says, would you like that someone did this with your sister or your mother or some relative? He says, no, absolutely not. He says, so this thing you want to do, if you were to do it, it would involve someone else's sister or their daughter. Why do that to somebody else when you wouldn't want that? And he put his hand on his chest and he made dua for him. And was very profound about this particular interaction. See, if we think about someone that comes with that request, our reaction is what? We drop the evidence on them. Well, if you do this, I'm just telling you, this is the punishment in Islam for that action. These are the consequences of what you're going to do. I've done my part. I've told you what will happen to you. Now you go do whatever you want, but I've discharged my responsibility. Does that help? Does that bring about a change in that person's behavior? No, it doesn't. We know that it doesn't. Because if the information alone was enough to change behavior, we would all be living perfect lives. Right? But it doesn't work. And so in that moment, even though he could have told him, this is the consequence of this action. This is what will happen to you in the afterlife. This is the path that you are going down. He could have told him all of those things, but he didn't, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He spoke to him in a way to bring about the intended outcome, the intended benefit. He approached that conversation from a perspective of empathy and compassion. And so we think, how do we apply that? If we have a friend that drinks alcohol, well, our reaction might be to say, well, okay, this is what the Quran says about alcohol, these are the hadith about alcohol, this is the punishment for alcohol, these are all the 10 million reasons why alcohol is haram, here's copy-pasted like 6 different articles, I've done my part, right? Okay, we know that doesn't work. So we say, okay, well, what do we try next? And now maybe I go to my friend, and I say, look, brother, look, sister, don't drink. I know it's tough, but look at me. I don't drink. If I can do it, you can do it too. And so we think that coming from it from that perspective, by personalizing and being motivating, that we're going to help them. But the reality is that when we talk about approaching someone with empathy and compassion, it's more about trying to understand someone else's situation than projecting our own. The challenge is understanding and seeing things the way that someone else sees them. And so when I say, look at me, I don't drink, I'm neglecting to mention the fact that I grew up in a Muslim household. And so my parents didn't drink. And so we never had alcohol in the home. And by extension, the social circle that we had, our friends also didn't drink. And so I was never exposed to alcohol. And so by the time I got to college or I took a professional job, alcohol just wasn't a thing. And so it wasn't that difficult in the grand scheme of things for me to say no, because I never grew up with it. It was never a part of my life. And so it might have been a challenge, but it wasn't that hard to say no. But the person that I'm speaking to, maybe they grew up in a home where alcohol was a problem, where alcohol was readily available, where they've been drinking alcohol regularly since the age of 14 or 15. And so now at the age of 35, I go and tell them, hey, look at me, it's easy to stop drinking. That actually shows a high level of arrogance. It shows a complete lack of compassion, a lack of understanding of someone else's situation. And we find this very prevalent. We look at what other people are going through, and we come up with solutions. Well, if you just did this, if you just did that, you just need to go to school, you just need to finish school, you just need to go get a job, you need to, whatever the situation may be, we project ourselves. Say, look, I worked 2 jobs, I went to college, I was able to graduate and make something of myself, you can do it too. But maybe I never had to make a choice between my education and caring for a sick family member. Or maybe I never had to make a decision between my own education and supporting my family. There's a whole litany of things that can be going on in someone's life. And so we're never taught in our deen to judge people based on their circumstance. But yet this is something that we find over and over again. When we look at the discussions that dominate our country around almost anything that's become overly politicized, healthcare, race, immigration, refugees, any number of issues that you can think of, what we find at the root of the discussion, at the root of the debate, is a lack of empathy and compassion. Why should I have to shoulder the burden for somebody else? Why should I have to go out of my way to help somebody else when they're the ones who are irresponsible? They're the ones who made bad decisions. Why should I have to pay for it? وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ أَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمُ اللَّهُ قَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَنُطْعِمُ مَنْ لَوْ يَشَاءُ اللَّهُ أَطْعَمَهُ إِنْ أَنْتُمْ إِلَّا فِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. When they're told, spend from what Allah has provided you. Those who disbelieve say to those who believe, should we feed people that Allah would have fed them if He wanted to? Why should I have to do this? Why should I sacrifice my money? Allah can feed them, Allah can provide for them. It's not my responsibility. In antum illa fi dalalin mubin. Your entire perspective is in manifest error. Your entire way of looking at it is incorrect. You have the wrong lens, the wrong world view when it comes to these things. This is not the attitude of the believer. The believer is taught that in all situations they approach someone, they speak to someone from the perspective of compassion, from the perspective of mercy, from the perspective of trying to understand that had I been dealt the same hand as somebody else, had I had the same circumstances as somebody else, perhaps I would have ended up making the same decision as someone else did, or maybe even worse. And so if Allah has blessed me to be in a position to help, then I need to help. Because that is the attitude of the believer. That is the attitude that we are taught. And the Prophet ﷺ, he emphasized dealing with people from this lens, from dealing with people from a point of view of compassion, from a point of view of understanding what someone else is going through or might be going through. See, they say that you can judge a teacher by their student. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, his father, for most of his life, was not Muslim. Abu Bakr accepted Islam, his father did not accept Islam. And so you can imagine, if you know someone whose parents are not Muslim, right? Perhaps they embraced Islam later in life and their parents have not embraced Islam. You ask them, what is one of the most difficult tests that they go through? Is that they want their parents to have Iman as well. One of the most difficult things someone can go through is that I found Iman, Allah blessed me with faith, but not my parents. It's extremely difficult. We can imagine it was no different for Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. How much must he have been making dua? We can only imagine how much he pleaded with Allah to guide his father to Islam. And yet for most of his life, he did not accept. Finally, at the conquest of Mecca, right, some 10 plus years after the Hijrah, when many people were coming into Islam, his father said, I'm ready to become Muslim. I'm ready to accept Islam. So Abu Bakr brought his father, Abu Quhafa, white hair, white beard, right, very old man. It's difficulty walking. He brings him to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet gets up and he's like, this is an old man, what are you doing? We should have gone to him if he needed something. Why did you bring him all the way over here? Abu Bakr says, no, 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 he needed to come to you. He's ready to accept Islam. So Abu Bakr's father, he takes his shahada. And Abu Bakr begins to cry. And the Prophet ﷺ looks at him, and he says, Abu Bakr, tears of joy, happiness? Like this, probably one of the happiest moments in your life. You've been wishing for so long. For like 2 decades that your father accepts Islam, he finally did it. He finally did it, you're crying, this must be happiness. He says, no. These are tears of sadness. Because I would trade this, I would give this up for you to have had this feeling with Abu Talib. 10 years after Abu Talib passed away. And what should be one of the most happiest moments of his life, that his father is accepting Islam. And all he can think about is the perspective of who's with him. That I'm receiving a blessing that even the Prophet ﷺ didn't receive. He wanted Abu Talib to accept Islam and he didn't. And here's my father accepting Islam. I am sad that the Prophet didn't get to experience this. What type of character does someone have to have that even in that moment of emotion, they're thinking about somebody else? They're concerned more about somebody else. This is the tarbiyah, this is the education of the Prophet ﷺ. Because he enacted this day to day. He enacted this in every moment of his life. That no matter what the situation was, he always approached it from that perspective of compassion. وَأَقُولُ قَوْلِي هَذَا أَسْتَغْفِرُ لَكُمْ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. There's another incident, a very fascinating incident that happened around that same time. The Prophet ﷺ announced that the Muslims are going to go on an expedition. That everyone needs to get packed, everyone needs to get ready. And normally when there's an expedition, there would be some type of information, like where they're going, how long they're going for, so people can make arrangements. But this time it was very secretive. And so he told everyone, make your arrangements, but he didn't give them any information, not where they're going, not how long they're going for, none of those details, right? Because if you have to leave, if you go on a road trip for 1 day or 2 days, you make a certain level of arrangements, what to pack, what to take, what your family needs back home, all these little details. But no one knows anything. And so the companions are trying to figure out, where are we going? What are we doing? And so they go to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, they're like, did he tell you? He's like, no, I have no idea. They went to Aisha radiallahu anha, like, do you know? She's like, I have no idea. So everyone knows we've got to get packed, we're going somewhere, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. A companion by the name of Hatib ibn Abi Balta'a, and if you've heard his name, it's because of this story. He starts to deduce what's happening. He says, okay, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was just broken, this other incident happened, that thing happened. And he concludes, I think that we're probably going to march on Mecca. I think that we're probably going to march on Mecca. This makes the most sense given the circumstances. And so Hatib, before we proceed, we need to understand his resume. Hatib was a muhajir. So he accepted Islam early in Mecca and he migrated to Medina. So we know that the muhajirin have a special status because they accepted Islam and they left their homeland and went to Medina. Okay, so he's a muhajir. He took part in the Battle of Badr. A group of 300 some companions that are praised in the Quran, that Allah is pleased with, no doubt about their status. So he's a muhajir, and he is a Badri. And he was present at the bay'ah given at the incident of Hudaybiyah. Another group that is praised in the Quran. So these kind of 3 notches in his belt. 3 things that set him apart even from the other companions radiallahu anhu. So Hatib, he's got this resume. He's got this status. Now what he does is, when he kind of figures this out, is he writes a letter to the Quraysh. And he tells them, Muhammad is coming Do whatever you need to do. Kind of tips them off. A lead. And he finds a woman that's, traveling back and forth, and he gives her the letter, and he tells her to conceal it and go and deliver it to the leaders of the Quraysh. This is very odd. Why would a companion of this stature tip off the enemies? And so this lady takes it, and she goes on her way. And the angel Jibreel comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and he informs him of what's happening. He tells him that there is this lady, this is her description, this is what she looks like, this is the road that she's on, she's got a letter and you need to get it. So he sends Ali radiallahu anh and another senior companion, and he gives them that information, he sends them on their way. They go, and sure enough, they find this woman exactly as described, exactly on that path, all those details match up, and they stop her, and they say, we need your letter. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, look, we know you've got a letter that you're doing something with, we need it back. She says, I don't know what you're talking about. Ali says, look, neither were we lied to, nor was the Prophet ﷺ lied to, meaning the Prophet wouldn't lie and the angel Jibreel wouldn't lie. Okay, we can do this the easy way, we can do this the hard way, but we know you've got it. She says, okay, turn around. And then she had woven it into her hair, she took it out and gave it to them. So they bring it back to the Prophet ﷺ. The letter is open and the letter is read there. Umar radiallahu anh, he stands up and he says, Ya Rasulullah, this man is a munafiq. This man is a hypocrite. He is secretly working against Islam. Why else would somebody do that? Open and shut. We've got the evidence right here. We need to execute it. He's like, hold on. Not so fast. He calls for Hatib to be brought forward. Hatib comes. And they ask him, did you write this? What's going on? Hatib says, yes, I did write it. And the Prophet ﷺ asks him, why would you do this? He says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm worried about my family. See, all the other companions, they all have these deep family ties in Mecca. And so if something goes down, if there's a battle, if there's a war, something occurs, the tribal system will protect their families, their relatives. But my family is not networked in. We don't have that same status. We don't have that same benefit. And so if something happens, my family is going to be the first to go. And so all that I was hoping was that this letter would give me enough favor with them that my family would be taken care of and my family would be left alone. But Ya Rasulullah, Allah is going to make you victorious. That's his iman. Like, I know Allah is going to make you win. I'm not in that. Allah is going to make you win no matter what I do. But I was just worried about my family. Umar radiallahu anh, he gets up again and he says, Ya Rasulullah, he's a traitor. Okay, maybe he's not a munafiq, but he's still a traitor. He has violated the terms of national security, essentially. He has put lives at danger. If something's supposed to be a surprise expedition and they're tipped off, that could create havoc. People could lose their lives, very literally. This is a high emotion situation, a red alert situation. And yet, the Prophet ﷺ looks at him and he says, Umar, Allah looked at the people of Badr and said, do whatever you want, you're forgiven. And what he said is right. He didn't do this out of hypocrisy. He really was just concerned about his family, so let it go, forget it, it's done. See, the thing is, when we talk about acting with compassion and mercy and all these things, in our heads we always say, yes, that's great, oh, good job, yes. We need to go home, we need our kids to do that. Yes, we need to follow this advice, but then what happens? We go to work tomorrow and we say, yeah, compassion, yeah, that's nice on Friday, but I got a business to run. I have a team to manage. I have results that I need to get. I've got things that I want to achieve, and I can't be a pushover. I can't let people take advantage of me. I've got to get things done, and this is how you get things done. This is how you move ahead. This is what you've got to do. Yeah, be nice, be compassionate, that's great for the masjid, but when it's time to do business, we have to do business. There's no room for any of that. That's not practical. But what we learn from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the pinnacle of good character, the one sent as the mercy to all of mankind, is demonstrating to us with his action that his approach regardless of